everyone, my name is Amy Gill, and today I'm presenting with Stacy Page. Our presentation is titled Communities of Support for Care-Experienced Mothers. This presentation is based on a paper which has been accepted for publication in the British Journal of Social Work's upcoming special issue on lived experience. Our third author, Melissa Hairston, is unable to join us today. So an acknowledgement of country is an Australian practice just to show awareness and respect for traditional landowners. So we'd like to begin by acknowledging the tradition of custodianship in law by recognizing the Yagara, Turrbal, and Kaurna people as traditional owners of the lands on which we stand today. And we'd like to pay respects to our elders past and present. So a quick outline of what we're going to discuss. This presentation and our paper is actually an autoethnographic exploration of social supports, given our experiences as mothers with childhood histories of out-of-home care. So we're going to begin with some reflexive statements to contextualize our orientation towards the research. Then we'll also describe how we make meaning of motherhood and our care experience. Then we'll describe some theories of social support which orient the presentation, as well as some limitations of formal service. We'll each describe our motherhood narratives and then contextualize these to demonstrate the importance of autonomous and authentic social connections for ourselves and our children. And we'll conclude with some implications for research and practice. So to start off, it's important to note that we are three women with very divergent experiences from care and into motherhood. Some of us became mothers shortly after exiting care, and I became a mother later in life. Some of us have experienced formal care, some of us have experienced informal care, and we also bring different experiences from our adulthood into the research as well. So my PhD topic is early parenthood within the context of out-of-home care, whereas the others are doing different things with their lives, which help shape their own viewpoints. But collectively, we share the belief that social connectedness arises from authentic relationships rather than formal services. And we also, so therefore, we acknowledge that there are structural limitations of formal supports, and we question whether or not the solution of formal supports is the best approach for ensuring that care-experienced parents have all of the social support that they need. So finally, collectively, we want to challenge the deficit views that are often held about mothers with care experience, and this is by professionals, society at large, and community in general, but as well as among researchers. And that is to inherently question parenting capacity and the existence of our support networks are two of the main areas. Okay, so meanings of motherhood and care. Motherhood is bittersweet for women who grow up in care, and that is because our experiences with our children can bring up memories of our own childhood trauma, as well as fractured family relationships. And the experience of care itself disrupts family attachments as well as community connections. So this means that there are often people who we might lack to have in our lives supporting us and being there with our children that we don't have, or in some cases, it's just the hypothetical, where lack of family and lack of support. So we often lack supports that other people take for granted. So a great example is that in the majority population, young people will typically be able to remain in their home of origin with their family as long as they are needed. And then if they decide to leave and come back, that is a very commonplace thing that happens, but it's just simply not an option for us. And apparently, people without care experience are also very commonly will receive all types of assistance from their family into adulthood. And that will also include the flow and effect of helping with their helping people raise their own children. And that's not an experience that we have. Okay, so now I'll hand it over to Stacy, who's going to describe some theories of social support.
So the theory of social support has two main types of hypotheses. The direct effects hypothesis states that social support is benefit at any time, and that's regardless of your stress levels. It states that those with high levels of social support have higher levels of mental and physical health, and that's when it's compared to those who have lower levels of social support. The buffering hypothesis states that social support is most beneficial when a person is experiencing stressful or adverse circumstances, whereby the social support helps to buffer the impact of psychological distress. And often with our experience of out-of-home care and motherhood, it has been during times of hardship that social support has helped to buffer the impact of distress that us and our children have felt through certain events in our life. When it comes to social support, there is perceived support versus the received support. Social support is most beneficial when it's perceived support, and that is knowing that there is support available to you when you need it. And often in our circumstances with us and our children, it's the knowing and the perception of having that support system there around for us when we need it. When it comes to social support, there are four main types. They're categorized into informational, which is through guidance and advice. Instrumental, which is your physical assistance and resources, your emotional support with empathy, love and affection, and companionship, which creates a sense of belonging and feeling cared for. Now, why there are these four types of social support, it's a two-way street. So the social support is basically given and received in reciprocity, so with our support network. So it's not that we are burdening others with our needs. It's a two-way street. We're all supporting one another within our chosen groups. So with our experience of out-of-home care and motherhood, the sense of belonging has been a really important factor for us and our children's well-being. That's due to that companionship that's shared among our chosen community of support. Next slide. Yeah.
So I'm going to describe some limitations of formal support. And so professionals will often promote parenting and life skills training as the most appropriate response to what they perceive as inadequate social support among care-experienced young parents. But our main argument is that no practice approach can actually guarantee that there will be an authentic connection between that young person, between that care leaver or that young parent, and the supportive adults who are tasked with providing them with the life skills and training. And it's also important to note that care-experienced young mothers may reject formal services. So there's been a lot of research conducted that have identified some of the reasons, and these some of the main ones include the perception of stigma and surveillance bias, which ties into a fear of child protection intervention, or a fear that involvement in any sort of formal service may lead to child protecting intervention. And in other instances, care-experienced young mothers may just prefer to seek support from people who they already know and trust, which is one of the main arguments of our presentation. And finally, some care-experienced young mothers actually just desire to be completely self-reliant, and all of these feelings are completely valid. So what we propose are what we like to call communities of support. So while care-experienced young mothers do often describe problematic relationships with family, which we've alluded to already in our own lives, and also feelings of social isolation at times, it's important to remember that the absence of family of origin is not the only potential source of social support. So in describing our narratives, we want to highlight the potential of communities of support. By this, we mean autonomous and authentic social relationships which can promote well-being. And these can only be forged through genuine connections and personal commitment on behalf of all of the parties involved. And these sorts of stable attachments during important life transitions, such as exiting care and becoming parents, can help sustain us throughout our entire adult lives. So Our narratives describe how we each have exercised autonomy in building a range of social relationships to support our well-being. We'll start with Stacey's.
So this is part of my story. While I was in an informal kinship care arrangement, I didn't have anyone kind of watching over me or helping to make sure that I was cared for in the right ways. I didn't sort of find my community until I was encouraged by a therapist to go to university, and it was at university that, you know, I found my first sort of group of, you know, companionship, that sense of belonging, and, you know, that gave me enough confidence to then create even a larger community through my son's special needs school. So if you like, I'll just give you a moment to have a look through. Something that I would like to mention about being a single parent and how much I've loved being a single parent is the fact that me and my son are both neurodivergent, and my son is the gift that taught me about, you know, our neurology and why we think the way that we do. So, you know, that's been a really encouraging factor. It's the genuine connections that have really become the chosen family, and that community of people that care for us as we care for them.
Okay, so the next narrative is from Melissa, who can't be here today. She is my foster sister, and so she describes our foster family as a then middle-aged couple. So they fostered something like 70 teenage girls and through over many years, and there were usually 5 of us at a time. And Melissa describes how when she arrived, she thought of herself as broken and depressed. And she actually credits our foster parents, Judy and Jim, who she eventually began calling mom and dad, for putting her back together by showing her love, compassion, and respect. So she connected with them through Christianity and maintained a very close relationship after emancipating at age 18, which is a term that was used in place when we exited care in Ohio at that time. So their relationship continued throughout her life and continues strongly today. Our foster father walked her down the aisle, and our foster mother assisted her when she gave birth. She also notes how she and her husband and her daughter have also supported our foster family throughout the years, including when our foster father died a few years ago now. And so she ends her story by saying, "My life is proof that human connection is vital, no matter how that relationship came to be." So she emphasizes that our foster family are not, related to her by blood, and neither would her in-laws, but these are the people whose relationship she most greatly values as a mother. So now we're going to contrast this story with mine. So my narrative offers a completely different perspective within the exact same placement. So I didn't particularly connect with my foster parents, and I thought they were too strict, and I didn't embrace Christianity. And I think I might have also felt alienated because I am white and my foster family is Black. So I was really ready to leave as soon as possible and get as far away as possible. And then, unlike Stacey and Melissa, I actually didn't become a mother until later in life. And this was after moving around quite a bit. So I developed close connections with people in every new city, which in 3 different countries, and through things like my hobbies and activism. And so I became pregnant shortly after my husband and I had moved to Sydney. And this was during the first year of my PhD. But then in the first during my first pregnancy ultrasound, a tumor was found in my kidney. So this completely changed the course of my entire life. One of the things that I noticed with the perinatal renal carcinoma diagnosis was just how medical professionals completely changed their demeanor with me. Suddenly, I felt like all decisions were being made for me and not with me, which felt a lot like being in care. And among those decisions was a referral to a hospital social worker. And this experience was really traumatic for me. I was explicitly told that I had no social supports by a social worker who didn't even bother to ask about my wide range of relationships with people from things like, my knitting circle, my book club, and all of the people in my PhD community. Then I had a highly medically traumatic birth. I nearly died. I was in hospital for an extended period of time. And during this time, I felt like my parenting abilities were like overly scrutinized by the maternity staff. And I also felt really awful because I felt like I had been deemed an unfit mother and also just undeserving of basic medical care or respect. I was still pretty ill when we finally made it home. So this made it basically impossible for me to get out much. But during this time, I connected with members of my foster family, some of old friends and biological family living all over the world. And these connections continue to be vital for me because soon enough, we started to experience the full 2 years, essentially, of lockdowns during COVID in Sydney when I was parenting a toddler. So during this time, I found meaningful connections that are virtual primarily, and also with people who I feel we can relate to each other's life experiences. So, for example, Stacy, she lives in Adelaide and I'm in Brisbane, and I think we include each other in our support networks, but we've yet to meet in person. So this just shows that complexity is common in the support networks of mothers from care, but we can build our own communities of support which suit our specific needs. And now Stacy will speak to these points in greater depth. Okay.
So with our narratives, it demonstrates that care experienced mothers' support networks can be complex and valuable. The social support exists with the genuine connections that we've made, basically. So when it's come to like what Amy was saying, when Amy and I met and we connected straight away and we sort of felt that understanding with one another, and it was easy. It was, that really caring understanding, and, we can have conversations about our lives and as well as our research, and then also, to collaborate together on this. It's been lovely. It's, enriched my life, and I'm very grateful for Amy. I think the social support can enhance our coping abilities and buffer against the distress, the supportive relationships that enable mothers like us with the care experience past to heal through the trauma. I know that the first time I talked about my experiences in out-of-home care, I didn't want to say the wrong thing and upset the people that were meant to be looking after me, and that came at my own sort of peril, I suppose. That I was making excuses for the way that I was brought up, and it took me a long time to come to terms with the reality of the situation and the fact that I didn't have a lot of support, and that I wasn't really treated very well, which led to me finding a partner who was a domestic violence perpetrator, and I didn't want to have to start the cycle of abuse again. So I made sure that my son didn't grow up in an environment like that. As care experienced mothers, we can thrive when we feel that sense of belonging and when we find our chosen people with those genuine connections. And it's achieved by identifying, forming and maintaining these relationships that are meaningful to us. It's a very important aspect to feel, part of a cared for community.
Absolutely. Okay.
When it comes to the implications for social work practice, social workers, it would be really important to guide young people towards building their own communities of support as they're transitioning from care, and encouraging young out of home, like mothers that have had experiences in out of home care, to build those healthy relationships and enhance their self-esteem. The informal networks of support are invaluable. And, we can even rebuild family connections. There are some family members that since I've, in the 12 years of being a single parent, I've connected with, not many, but a few. As part of my informal supports, with my experience of being encouraged to go to university and finding a mentor, which is now my supervisor for my PhD. And, she's become a chosen family to me as well. The encouragement to identify potential sources of support with healthy attachments and romantic partners, and, that positive peer group relationship, and encouragement in higher education. So, obviously for me, that was where it kind of started, was through gaining an education and building confidence that way. I was always told that I wasn't very smart, in some not so nice words. So to learn that I actually had some intelligence, that really changed the trajectory of my life, and, made me feel connected to the people throughout the university. So with formal and informal mentors throughout that higher education.
And the main point here is that each of these avenues are ones that have worked for us. And so social workers and professionals should really aim to make sure that what they're trying to encourage in young people is what works for them, not what they think is the right thing, but let people be, we know what's best for ourselves. Okay.
With the implications for maternity service, as Amy mentioned before, having such a traumatic birth, I also had that experience. Fortunately, I wasn't diagnosed with cancer, but the birth that I had, I almost died through that as well. And my partner was extremely abusive the whole time. And throughout my prenatal services, when they asked me about my life, they also told me that because I had no support and I'd had so much abuse, that I was going to be very likely to have postnatal depression. And that really upset me, because I was very excited about having a child. There was nothing I wanted more than to be a wonderful mother to my son. But the discouragement that I felt through the maternity service of making me feel like I wasn't going to be a good mother, or I was going to be depressed, or not do a good job, it was really, really confronting. And you do feel that surveillance. You feel like you're being judged. And then, throughout giving birth, over the 28 hours of labor, my ex-partner was extremely abusive the whole time, and the staff didn't offer any support. It was up to me to try and, gain the knowledge and support of my situation to then be able to leave. So then I was able to then find some, peer support through social support networks that were my chosen people. Maternity service delivery can be a source of trauma, exacerbates the feelings of powerless. And I think for me and Amy, we both felt that our autonomy was taken. We didn't have that feeling of support that Melissa had described, which impacted us. And professionals can be a bit more sensitive to the potential of the re-traumatization within social work and maternity services, and taking that that trauma-informed response and noting things like symptoms such as anxiety and hypervigilance, and the reflexive practice that help professionals become more self-aware and confront their underlying assumptions. Did you want to expand on that more, Amy?
Yeah, so I guess to add, the only really things I can say to add to it is as you can see, the implications of being in care really do impact us throughout our lives. And so the need for sensitivity among maternity service delivery is key, because all three of us, felt like we weren't listened to and weren't supported during childbirth, which is one of the most vulnerable times of a mother's life, of any woman's life. And I think one last thing I think is worth noting is that I actually did disclose my out-of-home care history in a social history interview at the start of my pregnancy. And I naively believed that this was to help inform that trauma-informed practice, to make sure that maybe the caregivers would be more sensitive. But in fact, I felt like it was almost used against me and used to question my, if nothing else, it definitely was explicitly used to question the number of social supports I have. And so what we can learn from this is that there's a lot of work to be done within maternity service delivery, because so many mothers will have and do have childhood histories of child protection and out-of-home care. And even for those who don't, any type of childhood experience and adverse experience is going to impact maternity health care. And so we need to be supported throughout our experiences rather than diminished and undermined. And so lastly, implications for research. The first thing, one of the main implications, is that we need to have a greater understanding of informal support patterns among care-experienced young parents and parents of all ages. And this is needed to ensure that social workers and professionals in all areas are actually better equipped to guide care leavers and towards building their own communities of support. And the research that is needed should be directly involving more care-experienced parents, who are both younger and older. But it also really needs to include types of all kinds of research that is actually led by researchers with care experience. So in this presentation, our autoethnographic study, I want to point out, there's value in autoethnographic research because it offers unique insights from lived experience to inform future research, but it also contributes to the debate on policies and practices in its own right. So finally, we just want to emphasize that the aim of sharing our experiences is to more broadly promote awareness of the capacity for communities of support to empower and liberate care-experienced mothers. Now, this perception is something that comes directly and is informed by our lived experience, which is why it's important to ensure that there are opportunities for people who have lived experiences to be meaningfully involved in the research and guide the direction, shape the aims, help determine what the outcomes will be, rather than just the more tokenistic or superficial level of involvement, which is more often than not the case. And there are a lot of reasons why sometimes this limitation happens, which are outside the scope of this presentation, but we just want to emphasize that that autoethnographic research, I suppose, because that's what we have today, is something that we should be seeing hopefully more of.
Absolutely, I totally agree. It is very emotional when you share your personal experience, but it's also a way of healing. I think the more that I've spoken about my experiences and opened up about things that have happened, it's helped to heal myself and the pain that I felt throughout the years, and connecting with the communities of support have made me feel empowered and helped to liberate me from the pain and the stress of the trauma of my past. And I feel like it's even though everybody has their own individual circumstances, and we've tried to show that within our narratives of the three of us and our different perspectives. But doesn't matter, what your experiences have been, the potential of the communities of support, can really benefit anybody that's, in need of that support network. And, we're social beings, so we generally, feel better once we're within our group that we feel that genuine connection with.
That's right. That's right. So the key points from our presentation are that meaningful social supports have to come from genuine connections. And that is because formal services will often fail to meet our needs, as we've described. But also that care experienced mothers, we can thrive when we feel a sense of belonging. And also that our support networks are all going to be unique, but collectively they enhance our coping abilities. And that is especially true during times of crisis, as we've discussed. And the biggest takeaway, I think, from this presentation should be that professionals can and should be guiding care leavers towards forming their own support networks by helping them identify potential sources of support that are actually matched to their needs and preferences. So we'll conclude with our references. And we forgot to put a slide with the contact details, but we can easily, I guess, if you have any questions, be found on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or also via our institutional email addresses. So thank you so much for listening.